All right, guys. So thanks for joining. And I know we spoke earlier as well in February, which was a very very big success. And we just want to make sure that we continue meeting all of us, share what we are doing because all of us are trying to solve pretty much similar problems and we are trying to invent solutions and iterating might as well share and exchange ideas so that our journey becomes simpler and more efficient, so that's the purpose. Um, i i take care of the global supply chain analytics in Schneider Electric, and also I also take care of some of the global planning responsibilities, especially for the short range duration planning activities which are mostly to do with execution. So I work in the global organization, and these are the two portfolios I manage.
You take forward now, introduce yourself, then take forward, and then we revisit.
Good evening, everyone. And if most of you are in and around Asia, I'm sure that you would be looking through what is the exciting period which we are going across. So we see tons of excitement around supply chain today. There used to be a time when supply chain used to be spoken in terms of application softwares, which almost for 20 years or 2 decades we used to talk most of the fundamental changes which we do in supply chain, coming out of package solutions. And it's so exciting to see that in many organizations today, either RPA or AI or blockchain or any of the applications, people have started to think on how to apply, which is rightful in terms of process automation, merging with the cognitive tools, which comes into play. So we as an organization, try to play this with very large enterprises around the world. Based out of Singapore, we are around 75 guys. We started way back when enterprise software in blockchain was unheard of. We had few projects from IBM here and there, and we didn't find anybody else. So that's a gap which we thought of filling up. And we built up a software application, which can run, quite plug and play, connected to the ERP environments which you have. Because we all come from a large ERP background experience, so we understand the complexities in which these works, and we found the gaps, which could be filled up by using blockchain as a technology. So in today's, your group, our contribution is going to be a 15 minutes of, what we have learned. We have picked up some use cases here and there to make it interesting, so that you would understand that there is a few activities, which is delivering value in and around blockchain. Because I think most of the supply chain framework we have seen talks and understands a lot about RPAs and AIs and which is getting used, and IoTs, which has become old-fashioned today. So my objective today is to just come across 5-6 use cases which I picked up, and then I'll have a good conversation with you. I do have James Green, Vinayak, who is supporting me with the presentation. So we'll do a 15 minutes quick dive, and then we will show you some system related stuff, so that you can get a feel of it. As per Ghana, almost 60% of the global supply chains have deployed at least 2 to 3 use cases in blockchain. Now, it started with pilots way back in 2016-17, and it just slowly moved across to production on maybe quality, maybe tracking, visibility, some of these areas in some part of the manufacturing, and also deep tier supply chain side. Now, so this is going to get into mainstream, by 2022, which is going to be large deployments, which will happen because of the value, which is generated out of it. This is a very interesting report. I think BCG and McKinsey has put a bit more added colors into it, and we find that the whole market, actually we work with them, we contribute to these guys to come out with what is happening with respect to the market in terms of these technologies. Now, in our experience, we have seen projects going really well in terms of visibility on supply chain. So this is one of the aspects which I think Gautam and Madhu mentioned before. But visibility not from the tier 1, but the tier twos and tier threes and tier fours in terms of supply chain. We have found really good value in application of blockchain because it reduces the cost and also gives an expanded network in terms of these processes. We have found the same level of success in terms of provenance and authenticity. Authenticity in terms of qualifications, quality certificate, or maybe any types of qualifications, which comes across the food chains. We have found quite a bit of activity, and I'll today discuss with you something on a mining, so where you source in terms of sustainability and then reach it across, in cross-border trade transactions. So I would say that these two use cases are very, very relevant, and these two broader areas. And when you dive down, you would find rather quite a number of use cases which fit into your own strategic, like what Schneider has on 5S. Each of you have a strategy in terms of your supply chain automation. So this probably feeds into any of those frameworks out there. From our platform, dltledgers is a SaaS platform which fits into your cloud strategy, and we look at these 5 use cases which we have plug and play in terms of solutions. The first one is we found that at the point of exit of post manufacturing and into the supplier, you lose track in terms of, in most of the cases, you lose track, and you'll have only 30 to 40% digitization, which applies in terms of movement across to the shippers and banks and surveyors and warehouses, which goes through the extended chain process. And the same thing would happen in terms of your supplier inventories or your subcon inventories, which comes across to you. So we play a good role in terms of tracking and visibility, and also we connect that into financial institutions for supply chain finance, connectivity to supply chain. Provenance and sustainability is another area where we have worked with companies tracking from source level exploration all the way to the customer. For mining companies, or relatively for food and some of those areas. Sustainable sourcing is another area. I don't want to describe more about it. And supplier tracking, again, related to supply chain finance. So the supply chain finance is a supplier financing framework which can be built within an enterprise. Earlier, large companies used to go to banks, like you go to Citibank or BNP Paribas or DBS or any of these guys. Now large corporates wanted to have multiple banks to operate with. They want full control over their suppliers. So how can you build a network and then do supply chain financing as a part? It's more like an integration between your supply chain framework and your supply chain finance framework, which is a kind of a gap which we see in many organizations. And then, of course, extended supply chain, we have found certain gaps where we fill up. So maybe I'll quickly go through certain use cases. The first one, it's a busy slide, I don't want you to read it. This is about cross-border trade execution. So once you have your raw meg movement or your subcon movement coming across in your supplier side, we can track from your vendor all the way, tier vendors all the way down to you. So this is an example of Cargill, sending out, it's probably more towards agri side. So Cargill is sending, I think. Bean curd, I'm not sure, so soybeans, from Brazil all the way to Indonesia, and it goes through multiple cycles. I'm taking an example during the COVID times, and the number of steps it has reduced, and complete digitized process from multiple parties which comes into play. So blockchain in specific is about trustless parties and parties coming together. It's a very easy statement to make, but when organizations try to work together, how do you make it simple? How do you make it consumable? And how do you ensure the data is relevant, secure, and it goes back into the enterprise frameworks where we can act on those data and quickly make decisions behind it. So this is a clear example of one of the use cases which runs in plenty within the platform. The second work is something which we have done for Vertiv. which is to connect the channel to service to engineering. So there is a whole story on how the smart contract, for automated services, which is a service contract which they usually give for deployment, and the different parties which comes into it, and the authentication and the qualification of each party, and their request forms get committed and completed on time in blockchain. So it is a complete tracking of Vertiv with their own subcontractors in terms of connectivities, performing certain tasks, and then those tasks are getting completed and authenticated. And there is a lot of certifications which comes as a part of this process. So that's another. I've just picked up from here and there. I'm just showing you some of these cases, and this is about alumina being exported across to US. US wanted to make sure that it knows the source of these alumina. So it's in the language which they have. It's called as chain of custody, which is like PO tracking and order tracking and BL numbers, and there are around tons of 15, 20 different documents which get tracked along with the process. So it's tracking from the exploration to the smelters. So there are multiple points which comes into play, and then it finally reaches the customer, which is the customs in the US, and they clearly know that it comes across X places. And it has gone through X places to reach here. Very critical requirement. This was a CEO level project, which they wanted to initiate on and then try, working together in blockchain. They had already defined it. It has to be in blockchain for authentication purposes. And then, maybe a D house is a good example of food safety, which is livestock. KFC, one was chicken and the other was pig. So KFC wanted to know, the difference between corn-fed chicken from thousands of farms. So you have to track the animal feed, which goes into these farms, and then there are multiple points of their legacy environments, which connects across, as well as their SAP environments, from the key customer, the anchor, which connects across and tracks through the provenance and gives the results in terms of the process. When I say tracking, in this case, it is about veterinarian has done the right certification or not. So it's a veterinarian at the source level certifying that, yes, I have on X date done X task, so that we are sure that the meat we eat is quite safe, for us to do. So I'm sure this is a very important and rising area, because this is the food we have in our plate and something which we eat. So the food safety is going to take a lot of importance in terms of tracking, if it is going to be paid by the final customer. We have worked for Gautam, I think in 2018 or early 2019, for a pilot, which was for multi-tier extended supply chain visibility. This was about Schneider Electric buying, a subcon across to Flextronics, or the second fabricator, and the fabricator going across to the chip manufacturers. So how do you track the chip manufacturer's delivery across to the fabricator, where the contractual commitment is between Schneider Electric and the fabricator in terms of the subcon, and ensuring that there is on-time delivery. So if you think of the old EDI solution, you have to connect across multiple parties, peer-to-peer, and once connected, it can only do one set of tasks. But when it comes into blockchain, once the connection is established, it can do multiple sets of data collection in that process, which is the power of blockchain. So this use case was looked at in terms of as one of the experimental projects of Schneider. And it is still in discussion with Schneider, which is like the tier 2, the tier 3 tracking process. It cannot be a reality if users are going to be priced, and it's going to be super expensive if it's going to be a system like Salesforce or SAP, which charges $1,000, $2,000 per user. So it may not be a reality. So how can you have the less costly, kind of framework, but at the same time you're able to track and authenticate it? So this was more of something like that, which I remember, which we did it in less than 4 weeks time, so which is quite another use case. Now I'm sure this group doesn't discuss on supply chain financing, but supply chain financing, it is a supplier financing which has come up really important during the COVID times, because we want stickiness in terms of these suppliers for early payments across to them. So we have around 45 banks in our platform which services the suppliers for corporates. So the corporates deploy the supplier financing framework, and then it can be given across to multiple banks in terms of financing the processes. So in the old traditional way, this used to be going to a bank and setting up $2 to $3 billion of supplier financing with that bank. We are working with certain companies like Lenovo, Li Fang, so some of these organizations, initial stages of how to set up 8 to 10 billion worth of supplier financing, so that there is stickiness in terms of this financing process. So in total, when I discuss through this path, I will not be doing justice if I don't say that there is a Singapore program currently running. So if your entity is based out of Singapore, the Ministry of Trade and Industry has supported our platform, and we can do pilot transactions for any organization registered in Singapore on a 90% subsidy for year one. So what we are offering is the entire hardware and software for you to co-create. You can come in, you can start using a use case pilot into it, and you can test it out. You can your R&D organization can try whether this works for you or not. You can pull up your sleeves and do some changes to it so that it works for you. So there is a 12-month absolutely SaaS subscription into the platform, and we sit on Microsoft Azure with all the security frameworks which is required. We have around, as I told you, around 45 banks in the platform like DBS, ABN AMRO, Standard Chartered. So we have a number of banks in the platform which operates and gives the comfort levels which you need in terms of security and other environments. We offer 5 days training and consulting for a 4 weeks pilot delivery for you. So if you have any use cases, if you are looking at qualifying it, if we can give you some experience from our end, we'll be very happy to do that. And many plug and play modules are pre-built for you. I think we'll take a short sprint on how this looks, and I have asked one of my colleagues to come in and help us with that. And we have quite a lot of press coverage and what we have done across to the market. So maybe you can Google us and then take a look through what we do. We are super happy to come in and help because of this program, which I'm super excited about. Which I think there are around 69 companies which has signed into this one, because this is something which the government is offering, across to large companies to do digital innovation out of Singapore. So you get a 240K worth of stuff for just 16K. The rest is paid by the government, and a little bit of co-paid by us. And you have no headache. Just sign a 3-page document on the order and you can start working on it. So it's as easy as that. No filling up of any forms or no direct interaction with the Enterprise Singapore or IMDA as a part of this process. And if you have an R&D innovation, if you have a framework out of Singapore, we'll be very happy to talk to you with respect to this.